This is a quick rundown on the LEM trigger variant for Heckler & Koch style pistols. The LEM, or law enforcement modification, as I guess they call it, can be quickly described as a light double action only with a short reset. Basically how it works, a traditional double action, when you pull the trigger on a traditional double action, it will be a hard, constant pull throughout the entire trigger pull. And what you're doing on that trigger pull is you'll be fighting the hammer spring that's inside the grip here, and you're fighting that hammer spring to cock the hammer and then to release the hammer. What the LEM does is it preloads that hammer spring when the slide is racked, when the slide is cycled. What that does is it makes the trigger pull much lighter than a traditional double action only. What it also does is it allows a heavier spring to be used as your hammer spring. The result of that obviously is that more force is put on the hammer, which hits the firing pin harder, which puts a bigger indentation in the back of the primer on the bullet, and makes for more reliable firing. A little, I guess. That's at least what the operator's manual claims. But the coolest thing about the LEM trigger is the reset point. And since it's still a traditional double action, we can simulate what it would be like if the LEM didn't have the short reset. But here we're going to pull back on the trigger, and I'm going to hold the trigger to the rear, cycle the slide again like it just fired, and the reset point for the LEM is right about here, and that's when I can pull it back again. On a traditional double action, the reset is here. So from here to about here, which is about a half an inch, 3/8 of an inch, something like that. So half an inch or 3/8 of an inch less travel on the reset than a traditional double action. Obviously that'll allow for quicker follow-up shots, which is one of the advantages of having a single action over having a double action. Sorry, my dog is snoring behind me. So you get the safety of a double action only in that it's a long trigger pull and somewhat heavy. At the end of a variant 2 trigger pull on the P2000, it's about a 7.5, 8.5 pound break. To describe the feel of the LEM trigger, the initial slack here, that entire length, is about 1.5 pounds of pressure to pull it all the way back. When it hits all the way back here, that's when you have the 7.5 to 8.5 pounds of pressure, and then the break pretty soon after that. So the safety of a double action, but the shorter reset than the traditional double actions. It's still a bit longer than a single action reset is, but advantageous nonetheless. Variant numbers. This is where it can get confusing. For the P2000, the variant numbers are V1, V2, V3, V4, and V5. All of those except variant 3 are LEM trigger variants. That would mean variant 1, variant 2, variant 4, and variant 5 are all LEM trigger variants. The only thing that changes between those 4 variants is the weight of the trigger pull. Variant 2 is typically what comes directly from the HK factory. That's the 7.5, 8.5 pound brake back here. V1 I think is 4.5 pounds back here. V4 is 5.5 I believe, and V5 is I think 6.5 to 7, somewhere around there. But all of that's done by just swapping out 2 springs, no big deal. That's the P2000. The USP variants are a bit different, of course. The variants, obviously, for the USP are variants 1 through 10, excluding 8. And a lot of times, variant 7 will get confused with the LEM. If you look at a bunch of gun broker auctions, or sometimes you'll walk into a gun store, and they'll have a USP or a USP compact or an HK45 or an HK45C, and a lot of times they'll label them as variant 7, but they're actually an LEM. Variant 7, just looking at the description, they describe it as a double action only with no control lever. No control lever. While that is an accurate description of an LEM from the factory, the variant 7, if you were to order it from the factory, would come as the traditional double action only pistol. It'll just be the 12-pound pull with a long reset, much like that. So if you see something that says variant 7, make sure it's, a lot of times you can get an LEM variant at a cheaper price because the guy can't get rid of it because nobody wants the variant 7. But check with them, it might in fact be the LEM. How can you tell if it's the LEM? The easiest way to tell on a P2000 and a P2000 SK, if it doesn't have a decocker back here, it's a variant. It's the LEM trigger. That's the easiest way to tell on a P2000. On a USP or USP compact or HK45 or HK45C, it's not so simple because it might have a control lever and be an LEM. The easiest way to tell, ask if you can see the gun and ask if you can dry fire it. Easiest way to tell, take it off, make sure it's not loaded obviously, make sure the safety's off if it's equipped with a safety. Rack the slide, pull the trigger. Well, first off, when you rack the slide the first time, obviously the hammer should stay in the forward position. Pull the trigger. If it's light, sorry, dog burped. Pull the trigger the first time, and then just let the trigger go all the way out, and then pull the trigger again. If those two trigger weights are different weights, then you have an LEM variant in your hand. Again, rack the slide, pull the trigger twice. If the trigger weights are different, you do have the LEM variant. As far as conversions go, if you have a USP or USP compact or an HK45 or an HK45C, any of those can be converted from whatever variant they are to the LEM trigger. And you can have all the different weights that you want, just like you would in the P2000. However, the P2000 cannot be converted from the variant 3, which is a single action, double action, to an LEM variant because the frames are different. And on the USP, I alluded to this earlier, you can have a safety lever on the LEM. Obviously you can't have the decocker, but you can keep the safety lever on the USP series and the HK45 series. And unfortunately, the P30 does not come in the LEM variant, and HK says that it's not coming. So that's about all I can think of. Hopefully that's all you need to know, and hopefully I didn't put you to sleep. I think the dog back here, maybe wake him up with goldfish. Alright, good times.